Hi, welcome to the National High School Center's webinar, Stories from the Field, Putting Early Warning Systems into Practice. Today's webinar is the third in a series of webinars introducing our new early warning system for the middle grades and enhanced tool for high school. The first webinar, Implementing an Early Warning Intervention and Monitoring System to Keep Students on Track in Middle Grades and High Schools, and second webinar, How to Use the Early Warning System Middle Grades and High School Tools to Keep Students on Track for Graduation, are available on our website, www.betterhighschools.org. They can be accessed either through the Early Warning System page or through the archived webinar pages. In addition, all of the materials referenced, including our tool, technical manual, implementation guide, are also available from our website, along with our community of practice, a place for discussion about technical and implementation events throughout the process. We can have a discussion about those on our community of practice, and staff from the National High School Center is also available to answer questions there. Today's webinar will be recorded. All telephone lines have been muted, and we invite participants, if you have any questions, to submit them to us through the Q&A pane located on the right-hand side of your screen. Please submit them there, not through the chat window, enabling all of the presenters to receive those questions, and there will be time for them to be answered during the end of our presentation today. We're excited to get started, so without any further delay, I'd like to turn it over to Susan Theriault. Susan?
Hey.
I can hear you.
Good. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending the presentation today. Just so you're aware, we are from the National High School Center. We're a national content center that provides support focused on high school improvement. We serve 16 regional comprehensive centers as well as state education agencies, and we've done work focused on supporting the RCC's, state education agencies, as well as districts and schools in improving high school, as you'll hear later today. So our agenda today is really just to kind of open it up, have a welcome, give a very brief overview on early warning systems for those of you who weren't able to attend any of our early webinars, just so that we're all on the same page. And then I'll give you a brief overview of our experience at the National High School Center and our observations with regard to state implementation of early warning systems and how that's worked. And then we are very fortunate today to hear from practitioners and their perspectives on rolling out an early warning system in their states. Both Virginia, a member of the Virginia Department of Education, and folks from the California Department of Education are here today to give you some real insights into the benefits, challenges, and strategies for rolling out an early warning system. And then, as time allows, we do hope to get to some questions and answers. So to begin off, I just wanted to start with some basics about an early warning system. So where did this idea come from? Because dropout is such a big problem in the United States, as we all know, about a third of all students leave the system before graduating, which has a huge and terrible economic consequence for our country, as well as for the individual lives of these dropouts. So because of that, IES came out with a dropout prevention practice guide that identified some promising practices around strategies to improve graduation rates. And those include diagnostic practices, which encompasses early warning systems in this case, targeted interventions, and then school-wide practices. And as you'll see, an early warning system can really be used to inform all of these other areas, such as targeted interventions and school-wide practices. So when we first started to think about the idea of the early warning system and explore what was going on with regard to early warning systems across the country, in an effort to share this information with regions and states that are interested in these types of systems, we realized that it was really important to first define what we thought, what an early warning system is. And right now you're benefiting from the experience of many years of looking at this work to hone in on this and somewhat this definition. So what is an early warning system? Basically, it relies on readily available data that's housed at the school level or the district level. It allows users to predict whether students are at risk of dropping out of high school before they drop out, so early. And what that in turn means is that by identifying students early, you're able to support them with maybe less support, fewer resources, targeted in a strategic way to get students back on track into towards graduation. And then it allows users to target resources, as I mentioned, to support the off-track students in a way not only looking at individual students, which is an important part of it, but also looking at schools with needs or high numbers of students who are falling off track to help to target those resources in terms of funds, but also in terms of time and attention. You can use early warning systems as almost a leading indicator of risk in a school if you start to look school-wide. And therefore, you can examine patterns and identify not only school climate issues in an individual school, but patterns across districts, for example. For example, are many students from certain schools coming into high schools off track, for example. So, as we've moved through this process and started to get deep into our understanding of early warning systems, we found that there are different types of indicators that can be examined when you're using an early warning system. First, there are frequent monitoring indicators, and those are indicators that can be looked at multiple times over the course of a school year to identify whether a student is off or on track for graduation. For example, high school, if a student misses 10% or more days, even in the first 20 or 30 days of school, they may be at risk of dropping out of high school. So even in the first month of school, it's possible to identify students who may be at risk of dropping out and to identify them and provide them with supports quickly. There's also year-end indicators. These are indicators that are cumulative and based on a full year of data. Their final grades, for example, credits earned, and as well as attendance, some of those same monitoring types of indicators. But these are really designed to look at the end of the year where students are at and to inform the next year. What's going to happen over the summer, for example, and what's going to go on in the next year. And then there's this idea of transition indicators. They're very similar to year-end indicators, though transition indicators can sometimes integrate a number of years of data. But what makes the difference between transition and year-end indicators is that they really capture this information when a student is going from one school and transitioning to another. So, for example, leaving the middle grades and entering high school would be a transition period in which you'd get information that would follow the student and inform those in the school, in the high school in this example, as to whether this student is coming into their school and has immediate needs. So it allows users to provide supports before the student enters the school or just as the student's entering into the school. So what the National High School Center has done through its work on early warning systems is start to bring together this research and make it actionable at the school and district level. So what that entailed was a review of research on indicators both at the high school level as well as the middle grades level, the development of initially, about 3 years ago, a very simple Excel-based spreadsheet which has now become two tools, one a middle grades tool as well as a high school tool that embeds these research-based indicators and allows users to monitor students and interventions and provide support to the students, and as well as to look at reports from the school level, student level, et cetera, to make really good decisions and make data more actionable. It's also allowed us to collaborate with 3 RCCs and 3 state education agencies that were really interested and prioritized dropout prevention as a key activity in their states. So what this has allowed us to do is share the information that others have had, or the experience that others have had, and integrate that into the resources that we've developed. And actually, it's been the basis for forming this presentation today. So, the early warning system indicators, what are they? Quickly, there's an incoming indicator, an attendance indicator, course performance, behavior, and end-of-year indicator. They're slightly different for the middle grades versus the high school. An incoming indicator, as I mentioned, is like a transition indicator or an end-of-year indicator that informs the next grade. So if you're in the middle grades, information from the elementary school follows the student into the middle grades, informing those adults in the system as to what the student may need. At the high school level, it's coming from the middle grades to the high school. Attendance in middle grades, it's missing 20% or more of instructional time. In the high school, it's missing 10% or more of instructional time. As far as course performance is concerned, in the middle grades, it's a failure in English language arts or mathematics course. In high school, it's a failure in one or more courses, any course, and earning a 2.0 or lower GPA on a 4-point scale. Behavior indicators are locally validated, and then there's an end-of-year indicator. At the high school level, it's the Consortium for Chicago School Research's end-of-year indicator, on-track indicator, which integrates credits earned as well as course performance. So as we've started to work with these states and the RCCs, we realized that beyond a tool and making data readily available in actionable forms, there really needed to be some guidance surrounding that. So what we did was conducted a scan of data use in schools and combined that with what we knew about early warning systems and created a 7-step early warning intervention monitoring system, or EWIS, implementation process. And this, again, I'm not going to go into detail, but it guides users as they move through a process towards supporting students. And the prior webinars actually will have this information, and we also have developed a guide that you can obtain on the National High School Center's website. So, state implementation of early warning systems. How does it happen? What have we observed? In our experience, we've observed several types of state implementation and strategies for rolling out an early warning system. The first type I call technical assistance and support. And so this can be this has actually a broad span and can vary greatly, but for the most part, states provide this kind of resource, for example, access to the tool on their website, information about an implementation guide, and sometimes some customization at the state level for what that means in their particular state. I've also seen it in the district level. And then, in addition to that, a state may decide to provide some sort of support. So it could be a professional development opportunity. Sometimes it's data analysis or getting access to some local data, district or school level data, doing some analysis to add value and having the end users use it, or developing sort of learning networks, so people who are interested in the problem, trying to manage the issue, and working with their data. So developing an opportunity or creating an opportunity across the state for districts and schools to learn from one another. And in this case, what's great about it is that local districts and schools can decide whether to opt in or not into the process. So if they do want to participate, they can, but what you end up with is a group of people who are really actively engaged and involved in this type of work. Then we've also seen something what we call programmatic mandates. So this is in relation to integrating early warning systems either as a monitoring or reporting requirement around the early warning system indicators tied to grants or programs. So one example of that is that in our work with the Texas RCC and the Texas Education Agency, they linked they actually attached some of the reporting requirements for a grant, the 9th grade transition initiative, to early warning system indicators. In addition to that requirement, they actually the National High School Center with the Texas RCC actually provided professional development and support around the use of an early warning system tool, as well as the implementation cycle to support their efforts and actually, not only just use this as a mechanism for reporting outcomes on a grant initiative, but also to start to think about how this data could be used not only for the students who are being touched by this grant, but in a broader sense. And that did actually occur in some cases. And then there's the legislative mandates. Actually, the two states that we have that are presenting today will be able to discuss some of those strategies, but it creates a real incentive for actually rolling out an early warning system. In Virginia, which they'll go into in more depth, there was a legislation that passed, or a board regulation that passed, tying accreditation to high school graduation rates. And in California, middle schools were starting to be held accountable for high school graduation rates. So whenever we start to work with a state or regional comprehensive center, we get a lot of challenges. We face a lot of challenges. So what are they? They're local control, local control, local control. That is huge. And then there's the state and LEA capacity to use data to support the use of data in schools. Capacity can be missing, so support is critical. The availability and allocation of resources is important, and in terms of resources, I'm talking about funding, time, as well as people. And then just the issue of whether dropout prevention is a state or district priority, because when something's monitored or being looked at more closely, it just automatically gets more attention. And what implementation strategies have we seen? First, voluntary participation. Some examples of that are the technical assistance and types of supports that we talked about in the initial types of implementation. And this can be providing tools, implementation guidance, or just professional development support. Next is this pilot strategy, so piloting early warning system in schools and districts. Both Virginia and California, who are presenting today, actually did this. And the value in that is to, one, get a coalition of the willing, those that are really interested in implementing an early warning system. You know that you have engaged members and you'll be able to obtain feedback, but it's also a nice microcosm for individuals to use, for states to use this information on when they plan, if and when they plan to roll this out further, what the needs of users are going to be, so you don't have to just wonder and anticipate. You'll actually have a great understanding of what those needs are and perhaps be able to develop supports and be proactive about providing that support. And then in other instances, we've observed states that have integrated early warning system indicators into their state, district, and school data systems. So they're an automatic part of their data systems, and both in Massachusetts and Louisiana are examples of that. So what are the implementation incentives? First, if improving graduation rate is a priority in the state or district, it means it's getting looked at, it's becoming part of the accountability measures, it becomes an incentive to start to look at this and to find answers and ways to improve graduation rates. We at the National High School Center actually tried to add some value to our implementation incentives in that creating this free downloadable early warning system tool, as well as guidance around implementation. The entry costs are low in terms of risk and resources. To download the tool that's free and start to use it and examine how this would work in your school, it really just takes time and some attention and a little bit of a learning curve to get started. But then you can just go and see how it works for you. And then again, the National High School Center's early warning system tools, both the middle grades and high school tools, reporting has been simplified. The idea behind all of the reports we've developed they're based on a combination of what we think schools needed, as well as feedback from schools, districts, and states about what they needed and how they wanted to look at the data. So there's a huge variety of reporting, and what that translates to is the opportunity to make decisions in an easier format, because the data you need, and only the data you need, are before you. So our whole idea about all the reports that exist is to make data actionable. And then monitoring of school improvement can be linked to the indicators or at the school and district level. And again, that's something that you'll hear about in Virginia and in California, and how that really creates a strong incentive, accountability incentive for implementing an early warning system. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our first practitioner presenter from the Virginia Department of Education, Office of School Improvement, Lynn Sodat. Lynn?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today and to talk a little bit about Virginia's partnership with the National High School Center, which has really just taught us so much about early warning systems and made a large-scale implementation of an early warning system possible in many of our local school divisions and specifically in our high schools. What I would like to do today is just provide a brief overview of the conditions and chronology related to how we have embraced and endorsed the use of early warning systems in our schools, and then what I think might be hopefully most interesting to the group would be to share some of the lessons that we've learned and the next steps that we plan to undertake that might help other schools, districts, and states if they are implementing or are planning on implementing early warning systems. So this first slide is just a brief snapshot of Virginia data as of the graduating class of 2009, which is when we really began to embark upon this journey. And this graph shows that as of 2009, about 83% of our high schoolers after a 4-year period in high school exited with a diploma, and the remaining percentages had other exit statuses. And I think based on that, our State Board of Education decided to tackle the graduation rate and dropout rate issues by incorporating a graduation calculation into our state accreditation requirements, standards, benchmarks. So our state board made some modifications to our standards of accreditation, which included what is called, the Virginia approach is called the Graduation and Completion Index, or GCI. They put these into legislation in 2009, with them just coming into effect actually with a class that just graduated this past June. So all of our public schools with a graduating class had to meet not only our state requirements for content mastery, but also a certain graduation benchmark. And the GCI, or Graduation Completion Index, point values are on your screen right now. The way that Virginia approached this was to assign a point value to each student at the end of their 4th year in a cohort. Those are listed for you here. And a benchmark of 85 points has to be met for the school with their graduating cohort for the school to receive a full accreditation rating. Anyone below 85 points is not fully accredited. They're either listed as provisionally or accredited or accredited with warning. And those schools work with my office, the Office of School Improvement, and receive technical assistance from us, and they have some requirements from us as well. And this year that's about 40 schools. And in preparation, in preparation for putting together a process to provide technical assistance to schools, the National High School Center and the Virginia Department of Education partnered to look at the early warning system and to customize it for Virginia. And they created a pilot team of 4 school divisions, as you can see on the slide, to really look at the early warning system. We call it the VIEWS, the Virginia Early Warning System, to validate the thresholds that the National High School Center had developed for Virginia, and also to make some revisions, some minor revisions for Virginia's use of the tool based on pilot division's feedback. We developed an implementation guide to assist schools in knowing what to do with the data once they get it. Also, during that pilot period, a pre-high school index was validated. That's a transition indicator, as Susan had mentioned earlier, and that's incorporated right into our VIEWS tool that gives us an on-track, off-track status for incoming 9th graders. So that pilot was tremendously helpful to the department and, gave us the knowledge that we could proceed and recommend to the state board that an early warning system be one of the three main elements of the academic review process that we have in place for high schools that are not fully accredited. And again, I mentioned we have about 40 of those schools this year. This is our first year of implementing that, and those 40 schools work under my umbrella. And we have a three-element academic review process that provides assistance to them, the first one being the use of an early warning system, the VIEWS, Virginia Early Warning System, or a comparable tool. And really, our office and the state, I think, just feel really strongly that this was a key part of assisting schools and providing technical assistance because it is such a strong tool in helping schools use their data that they already have, put it all in one place, and identify students who are at risk. The second element that we have developed, or that is a part of our academic review process, is providing technical assistance to schools, and we do this in a number of ways. First, we do assign schools a regional liaison, which is a contractor that works with our office, and regional liaisons work with division and school teams throughout the course of the year to assist them both in their use of the early warning system, the interventions that they're selecting, and in their comprehensive school improvement planning. And in addition to that, we've provided some additional technical assistance for our schools. They are all participating in a web conference series based on the National High School Center's 8 Elements of High School Improvement. We're really using this as a very important framework as a part of what we do and the technical assistance that we provide. And we're offering some additional web conferences as well on a differentiated basis. And finally, we did require the formation of a number of teams to address graduation rate issues. We required both division-level and school-level teams as part of our academic review process. And this is part of us just really acknowledging as a Commonwealth that dropout is not a grade 9 through 12 issue. It is a grade K through 12 issue. So everything that our high schools are doing, we have a division representative on the high school team, and that division representative brings information back to the division. The high school principal reports at the division leadership meetings so that we can really look at this problem across the school system and not in isolation. Next, I'd like to talk to you briefly about what was called the RD&D project, the Research, Design, and Development Project. This was a project that occurred spring through fall of this current year as we were crunching the numbers on graduation rate issues, as we were getting our modified academic plan approved by our state board, and as we were beginning to provide technical assistance to the schools that were identified as not fully accredited, we had this tremendous opportunity to partner with the National High School Center and a number of their partners that are listed on your screen there to actually sort of try this out with a 7-step implementation process in 2 school divisions. And these were voluntary school divisions, again, a coalition of the willing, but they were also sort of selected because they were 2 very different school divisions. We worked with a large urban school division of about 3,000 students, and we worked with a small rural school division of only about 500 students. And what the pilot project did was the National High School Center and some of their partners worked with us and worked with those schools to really implement the first several steps of that 7-step implementation process over the course of several months. So that was forming a team, using the VIEWS tool, in our case the Virginia Early Warning System tool, reviewing the data, analyzing the data, and assigning interventions. And we just got so much out of that and learned so much from it that really helped us know exactly how we felt we could get our larger scale implementation at our high school off the ground and what we needed to do to assist our high schools in being successful in using this tool. So some of our lessons learned. We learned first and foremost that we needed to require schools to get that initial data into the early warning system right away. So once they were identified as warned or provisionally accredited, they only had 3 weeks to get all their data in. This made me maybe a little less popular with the schools than I would have liked to have been, but they've got to have the data in to work with it. And this was really helpful to us to know that we needed to require that. We planned an initial face-to-face meeting with our high school teams because our collaboration with the National High School Center showed us how well that face-to-face meeting worked with our pilot schools. And that initial meeting focused on how to use the data and the 7-step process and really making that process clear. We determined that it would be very important for our school teams to complete the self-assessment that the National High School Center has available that really focuses on the 8 elements of school improvement. So we factored that into what we do. We learned that we needed to require a key division leader to serve on the school team so that somebody who actually has the authority to make the changes that need to be made for high school reform is on the team and is informed of what is going on and what needs to be done. And likewise, as I mentioned earlier, we needed the high school principal to have a voice on the division-level leadership team, so we're requiring that as well. And we identified the need to build capacity, and you'll see this in our next steps, regarding research-based interventions for high school students. Briefly, some successes of the 2 schools that we worked with. Both of the schools that we worked with are continuing to use the VIEWS tool, even in the school that it is not required for use. The large urban school division, the huge school, really did find that without a key stakeholder involved in the process, they were not as successful. And they also found out that all of their school teams that worked with these 3,000 students to try to assist them really needed to communicate and coordinate their efforts. And the use of the VIEWS tool really gave them the impetus to put some processes in place to help that happen. The small school division that involved key stakeholders in the team, including the school superintendent from the start, really found that using the VIEWS tool helped them to focus on student outcomes. And having that information, those ABCs, attendance, behavior, and course performance in one tool, really gave them some direction and was extremely helpful to them. And even though they think in part, and we do too, because they've learned to use the VIEWS tool and they're using that data and identifying students, are fully accredited in the current school year, they're continuing to use the tool and the 7-step process. This slide I could have put in so many places because the 7-step process is so important to us, but just right before our next step, I circled steps 3 and 4 just to show sort of where we are as an office in school of school improvement and using the VIEWS data. And we really feel like we have to direct a lot of our attention this year to steps 3 and 4, because as schools are using the tool and they're identifying students, their initial review of the data does show that a student is flagged or not flagged, but what they really need to do is bring more data in and fill out the pieces of the puzzle, figure out why and what's going on with students in order to provide interventions that can be successful. So we are really putting a lot of our focus and our contractors' focus who are working in the schools with helping schools really work in the step 3 and 4 area and take the time needed to really solve their own school puzzle and student puzzles. And finally, the next steps for us in the Commonwealth of Virginia. First, we have contracted with a company called CaseNext to help us to create an early warning system. This is a second early warning system option for Virginia. It's not a free option. It does cost per school, but it provides everything that the early warning system does. We can set state thresholds to match the research-based data provided for us by the National High School Center. And they've kind of got some enhanced reporting and filtering capabilities. They've worked with New York and New Mexico on similar systems. And we're offering that to schools, any school across the Commonwealth who chooses to purchase that, to use the product, and they can use it across all grade spans. And finally, leading into what I know will be a fantastic presentation by California, we are really excited about the middle school, middle grades early warning system tool that the High School Center has developed and that California has worked on. We really have requests from school level, from division level, how can we do this at the middle school? Because ninth grade, they're seeing right now, it helps to identify in ninth grade immensely, but what we could maybe do in the middle schools to help students at an earlier time in their school careers, it could really be tremendous for our students. We are building some additional capacity at the state level, working with our partners at the Appalachia Regional Comprehensive Center on research-based interventions for high schools, and we're also developing a multidimensional change map or rubric for high school reform so that we can track our progress and have something that we can use to measure our high school successes and to move forward.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. That was really informative, and I really enjoyed getting an opportunity to learn about how Virginia was actually rolling out an early warning system. The remainder of the time I would like to give to California to present on how they've kind of taken this initiative and learned from Virginia and the National High School Center and all of their national partners and moved forward with that. We'll do that until the end of the hour. After that, we welcome participants to stay, and we will give time for questions and answers and discussions with our presenters. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ellen Ringer and her colleagues with the California Department of Education.
Thank you, Mindy. We really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this webinar. My name is Ellen Ringer, and with me is Johannes Trost, and we also have Ron Williams, our esteemed colleague at one of our county offices of education in San Bernardino. So the three of us will be co-presenting this portion of the webinar. So thank you very much. And next slide, please. Oh, next slide, please.
Ellen, you should have control of the slides.
Thank
if you
you.
just want to press the right arrow button.
There
you go.
We're set. Thank you. We thought it would be important to begin with the history of our time with the National High School Center and how this middle grades tool actually developed. My office now is K-12 Innovation and Improvement Office, but we were formerly a middle grades office dedicated to middle grades improvement. And so when we learned of the National High School Center's tool, we contacted them and said, well, what about a middle grades tool? Because we, just like Virginia talked about, we're very excited about the research that was unfolding over the last few years related to the importance of the middle grade, middle level education, and the importance of really addressing dropout earlier than in high school. And so that was how we began our relationship with National High School Center. They agreed, and they went to the Department of Education late spring and received approval, and now we are piloting that middle grades tool and excited to share that information of what we've learned this year. We began working with our middle grades and high schools because we believe that a systems approach is the most appropriate way to go when we're addressing dropout prevention. And so we have a number of our high schools and their feeder middle grade schools that are part of this pilot project. I want to emphasize that we are in a pilot stage, and so all of the work that we're doing currently are from voluntary schools and districts. Each one of them has volunteered to participate in this project. Most of them are in program improvement, and a few are receiving funds from the school improvement grant. So we're delighted that they are remaining with us during this period of time. We also want to let you know that California, our acronym is Early Warning and Intervention Systems. We decided to include the I because we believe that once identification occurs, the real identification of early interventions is what leads to student success. Also important to us is not to include M for monitoring, so you'll notice that we are EWIS and not EWIMS, and that's because sometimes monitoring can have negative connotation in California and elsewhere, I'm sure. And because it's a voluntary project, we didn't want our schools to consider this in any form or fashion as monitoring. So the National High School Center at AIR has provided in-depth, one-to-one collaborative support from the beginning. It's been a very synergistic relationship, and from my perspective, is the only way to have professional relationships. We've certainly benefited from learning from National High School Center and our other national partners, and have expanded our own understanding of what constitutes effective early warning and intervention systems. So we're very grateful for their continued support. We thought it important to provide you with some of the landscape for California. California has 1,131 districts. That may be a different name for others that are participating in this webinar, but that includes 11,218 schools. We have 58 counties, 11 county superintendent districts, and of course, we're geographically diverse. We also wanted to provide you with some of the numbers. We have 6.2 million students in California. 51% of them are Hispanic, 8.5% are Asian, 6.7% are African American, and 27% are white, not Hispanic. We have over 1 million, which constitutes 17% are English language learners, and approximately 40% of all legal immigrants in the United States enter through California. Another bit of information we'd like to provide you is that our state cohort graduation rate is 74.4%. Our dropout rate is 18.2%. But when you look at our Hispanic population, 67.7% have a graduation rate and 22.7% have a dropout rate. When we look at our African American students, 59% of them graduate, 30% of them drop out. So obviously it was important for us to develop a pilot project that addressed dropout prevention. This project is being driven by middle grades research, such as our own California's EdSource document, Gaining Ground in the Middle Grades, Why Some Schools Do Better. Also is built upon the Building a Grad Nation by Robert Balfons, and additional resources from the Everyone Graduates Center at Johns Hopkins University, and of course our own National High School Center. And it's not driven by state-level policy or legislation, although there is legislation that's moving toward implementation of an early warning system. But at this time, California has no mandated policy. We're a local control state, which means that policy decisions are determined at the local level, and one of the most satisfying outcomes of the work we're doing is that schools in this project recognize the outcomes that EWIS provides, and they're volunteering to participate. So these schools are providing us with validation for California as we move forward into the direction. We believe in a collaborative model, and we'll be addressing that in just a few moments. And we really do have two primary purposes for the work that we're doing here. One is, of course, to move this to scale throughout California, and also it provides us with an avenue for collaboration across the state. So let's talk a little bit about implementation resources. California believes that the human resources is probably one of the most important and valuable ones that we have. Thus, building capacity at every level is essential to our success. Being inclusive and also expanding our capacity at levels is something that has our focus. We also recognize that there is a large time commitment to this project. I'm sure Virginia will attest to that, which is why we included it as another invaluable resource. We also recognize that accessing technology from all participants was also required to implement our project. Our consultants, as well as district and school teams, were required to know the middle grades and high school tool and how to support the student identifier system, that they talked well with each other, and Jan's going to address that in a few moments here. And finally, there's no additional funding required for this project, only a reallocation of existing funding, something that was essential to communicate to our participating schools and districts. There's no fee for the tiered system of support we provide to our participants, something we find provocative at this time of fiscal need. The most important thing to us is sharing information and creating knowledge. So we suggest, if you have not done so already, to print out the attachment you received on this. It suffices to say that graphic represents all of the participants in our California EWIS pilot project. On the left side are our national partners. We're fortunate to work with two American Institutes for Research, one at the National High School Center and one at our local California Comprehensive Center. AIR at California is documenting our work with an outcome of a final report, and our AIR at National High School Center is providing us with technical assistance on the tools and support at every level. We're also fortunate to have Robert Balfons and Joanna Fox from Johns Hopkins University and Hitty Chang from Attendance Work as consultant partners on the project. We have consultants throughout the California Department of Education as members of the support system for our EWIS. We're also fortunate to have one of the county offices is taking a lead role in the work. Ron, would you like to share about your role?
Oh, yes. At our County Office of Education, we have established a call to action initiative in which we're focusing on the dropout issue from a county-wide perspective, which will impact over 400 and something thousand students.
Thank you. And finally, we have expert consultants from our California Middle Grades Alliance. It's a group of 11 organizations dedicated to middle level education, and our state SARB, our School Attendance Reporting Board. Jan is now going to speak about our participating schools and districts.
Good afternoon, or good morning. We have 20 schools and 9 districts participating in the project. The grade out schools and districts that you see up here, they start by saying you can see the counties that are involved here. So we have rural and urban counties involved, and a full breadth of the state of California, starting in the north from Tehama, going down through to Los Angeles. We've graded these out because these 2 sites have decided to join a second cohort. They did not feel ready, but we leave them in because the learning that we have is tremendous from those sites that exit as well as those that stay in. Because of the voluntary nature, it's really helpful for us to know exactly what the challenges are for those that can't continue at this particular point in time. So we have a variety. You can see the schools here. I'm not going to belabor this because of our time, but I just want to point out that the heart of what we do is students, families, and communities, supported by schools who are supported by this group of technical assistance providers over on your left-hand side. It's not a hierarchical model. In fact, it's 3-dimensional, which we can't really produce too well here. But I want to emphasize the whole issue of collaboration on this. And I also want to take a moment to say, for those who are listening who are CDE staff, and for those that are of our schools that are out there, thank you very much, because this only works when all of us make a contribution to it. So many thanks.
Thank you, Jan. And could you also speak to our timeline?
Sure. I'm going to go through this really quickly because I think you've covered some of it. So in the summer and fall of last year, basically we'd done our research, and the new early warning systems tool came out in October. We immediately called the National High School Center and said, "Great tool. Do you have anything that might work for middle grades?" Mindy immediately said, let's talk. So we were in dialogue through the winter. Mindy came out, and National High School Center presented at some workshops of our leading middle and high school statewide organizations, presented here at CDE, and then presented to our stakeholders. In the spring, we went through, and we, as you can see here, we identified who would be great people to participate in the project. We learned from Virginia. Virginia said, get the early adopters, bring in the people that are ready and excited about this. That's exactly what we did. It was an open recruitment process. We went through our partners, the Association of California School Administrators, School Boards Associations. There are 11 organizations that got information out to their stakeholders, or their particular groups, and from that, we had people call in and basically engage in a conversation about whether this is something that could really work with them and with us. We went through the spring and summer. We did our recruitment. We trained up our sites and our staff here at CDE, and we're currently exactly where Virginia is right now. We are in the stage of looking at, I believe it's stage 3 and 4. They've implemented the tool, and they're running their reports and looking at their data. And we're very excited. It took a little bit longer than we thought, but we'll talk about it in a little bit.
Okay, thank you. So we have a tiered approach of support to our participating districts and schools. I'm going to speak to the webinars, and then Ron is going to speak to the regional meetings, and Jan will speak to the one-to-one support we provide. Our webinars are a source of professional learning. We have 10 during the year. They target the 3 of the ABCs, so we look at attendance, behavior, and look at course support. So we also focus on community involvement, parent involvement, and our English learners and special needs students. We're going to also focus on goal setting and application of the tools. They specifically focus on various interventions that are successful at moving students forward. We believe that the whole child approach is important, so each of the webinars takes this into consideration. Ron, could you speak about the regional meetings, please?
In our regional meetings, we brought together the business community, the student and family involvement, as well as superintendents, including board members and support staff, as well as community members in these quarterly stakeholders forum in which we've engaged everyone in the discussion around reducing the dropout rate as well as the EWIS program.
Thank you, Ron. And Jan, would you speak about our one-to-one support?
Sure. One-to-one support, we recruited people from various divisions and offices throughout internally within CDE to be partners with schools. And basically what we wanted to do was to ensure that those people who are working with school improvement grants, program improvement, English language learners, variety of people really understood early warning intervention systems, because when we did a sort of face-to-face survey with them internally, they said, well, we have a lot to learn here. So we thought we'd assemble a work group that would then they would get trained and they would work one-to-one with the schools. And that's what's happened. We use, thanks to National High School Center, we use SurveyMonkey. We go on, we interview the school sites, but we don't send surveys to them. It's a one-to-one relationship building model where we take information that they provide us and put it into a database. Thereby, we don't rely on them to return surveys for the most part. So that's the sense of one-to-one support, and we'll go to the next slide.
So we take a look at our current status. What we can say is we recognize that each of our participating schools are at various stages of implementation, and that is perfectly fine with us. As a matter of fact, it's been reassuring to our schools that although the goal of the project is to view data, analyze it, and make the most appropriate choice of intervention for students, there are also additional intermediary goals that are essential for our success. Goals such as creating the right teams, communicating with parents in the community about the project, creating a setting that supports an EWIS at the school. We believe those goals can be pointed to for success stories also. So Ron, could you please talk about our January regional meeting?
In January, we will be having our, are you referring to the Cohort 2?
Yes.
Okay, yes. In January, we will be having our Cohort 2 meeting, which will be our second cohort of schools interested in pursuing the EWIS. And doing that meeting, obviously, we've learned a lot from our first cohort, and we will take what we've learned and to scale up and expedite the process for our second group.
Thank you. So we're currently working on the expansion, as Ron talked about. We believe it's going to probably take us about 3 years to be fully operational within the pilot before full scale can occur. At least this is our thinking at this point in time. So Jan, could you please discuss the element of time as we see it?
First of all, we built our partnerships, and we had to address the complex issues facing California and our funding situation here. That required the State Department of Education here to take a slightly different approach. Most of our work is compliance-oriented, and one of the biggest challenges that we had was making a transition from being a compliance and monitoring organization to really supporting the field. That meant listening. That meant really making sure that we could provide support and that the answers that we're trying to deal with and achieve through this project are mutually arrived at. And I think that partnership is really, really critical. It's an action research framework that we're looking at this point in time. We're not selling a product. We're looking for schools that want to engage with us in mutual research, and we want to ensure that the EWIS tool really meets their needs. So one of the approaches that we took was looking at what are the issues and goals that schools have in the coming year, and how can the EWIS tool help them reach those goals. Bottom line is we must have support at all levels, and we provided that, as we said, through this staged support model.
Okay, so our next steps are looking at our Cohort 2, as Ron talked about. We're starting to plan and get ready in January for that implementation in 2012-13 school year. We recognize the capacity building must continue. Hence, Ron is going to be working with us, and perhaps Ron can talk a little bit about that in terms of how we're going to expand for our county offices.
Yes, we're very, very fortunate at our county office, since we have a focus on the dropout, that being one of our key initiatives. And we're looking at additional county office personnel being a part of this, because at the county office in California, we have the capacity to really work with multiple districts, and those relationships that we have are instrumental in ensuring their participation, since this is a voluntary process.
Thank you. We're also excited to look at our elementary schools as being included in our EWIS for next year. We're working with a couple of different organizations to support us in that effort. And one of the exciting things that we've learned is that our Cohort 1 participants are anxious to act as coaches for Cohort 2 colleagues. So we're looking forward to that relationship building. And then, of course, we're looking at additional professional learning webinars, such as this one that we're looking at, and then also creating additional webinars in addition to the 10 that we have planned for this year. So we're very excited about the work that we're doing here, and I look forward to working with Virginia as we move forward into this year and next year. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Ron, Ellen, and Jan. I really appreciated that. Although I work with you on this project on a daily basis, it's been wonderful to kind of hear of the summary of all of the activities that you guys have accomplished over the year. It's impressive.
Thank you.
And likewise, Virginia. I know you guys have done so much. At this point in time, being cognizant of the time, I would like to give an opportunity for those who are going to need to sign off and go to other commitments to do so, but welcome those that have questions that have been submitted through the Q&A pane on the right-hand side of your screen to stay on. So I will give just a pause for this transition. Great. It looks like a lot of people have remained with us, and I'm glad to see that. The first question that we've received was in regards to the implementation manual that Lynn, you spoke of. And the question is, can you speak a little bit more about that implementation guide, and is something like that available for the public? Lynn, do you want to talk about that, and maybe Susan chime in as well? I know that you had a lot to do with that.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Susan, I'm sure, could explain how the manual was developed in collaboration between Virginia and the National High School Center. But the implementation manual really is it is just a fantastic little manual outlining that 7-step implementation process. Look forwards for each step, what should happen in each step, guiding questions to work you through each of the 7 steps. And it really, in my opinion, it just brings life to the tool itself, as far as having people who are at the school level know, what are we supposed to be doing with this information. Our views manual, implementation manual, is available on the Virginia Department of Education's website. And Susan and Mindy, I believe, you've got your implementation guide available on the National High School Center site as well, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thanks, Lynn. And it's actually it was as Lynn mentioned, it was a collaboration between the Appalachia Regional Comprehensive Center, the Virginia Department of Education, and the National High School Center. And the implementation guide that we've posted on the High School Center is very similar, if almost exactly the same as the Virginia guide. There may be some slight differences. And Lynn's right. There's guiding questions to move you through it. And we should also say that while it's aligned with the tool that we provide, we have heard of people using it with other early warning systems. So it's just a good guide to walk you through the implementation of an early warning intervention and monitoring system in general, but it's also aligned with the tool.
Great. Another question has come in from a participant asking to hear a little bit more about California's one-to-one support. How often does communication occur between the state and districts and schools, and about how much time per school is it taking for California to give that technical assistance or support? Can you guys speak a little bit more to the support provisions?
We can. Each First of all, we assign the schools to portfolios. There's a portfolio manager, which is one EPC who works with other educational program consultants here who are assigned to each of the schools. So the program manager or the portfolio manager may have a school also, but they also have EPCs working with them. That coordinates information coming through and identifies issues collectively that arise from the field. The amount of time it takes really varies. I have to say that in this stage, because of the complications of data, of loading the data into the tool, that has been really a major challenge for us. We have 15 different student information systems in California in use. There were only 2 in this project, but due to some of the timing, which is the startup of the school year when we got the tool and we were ready to launch, the IT departments at the district level, which is really where I would recommend people focus if they're going to do this, because when you have the IT person at the district level create the data for one school, your capacity to roll it out to the rest of the schools in the district is you've removed a major obstacle, let's put it that way, in doing that. So that's taken time because of other things in the queue. So one major lesson learned there was, and that's what we're doing with Cohort 2, is go through this process of loading your data at a time before school starts, and we really tried to do that. The amount of time that it actually takes to do this really varies. Some schools, the IT people, as they got to the project, would call us. We had one person pretty much dedicated to working with them. It was really challenging on the data issue. But then there's the training and support and the building of the teams, nurturing and coaching the leaders at each of the sites. And I would say that really varies depending on the phase. At the very beginning, there was a lot of time spent. I mean, it could have been as much as an hour or 2 or more in a week in that first phase. And it's sort of tapered off now as the districts began to take more responsibility. Keep in mind that there are 3 different models that are at play here in the pilot. One is there's school to school. In Sacramento, the person in charge of the student attendance decided that she wanted to really be the focal point for information going to the schools, and she was working with the schools, which was great. And of course, in the other model, we have Ron Williams and the San Bernardino County Office of Education supporting the schools and the districts in that region. So this pilot is really a very open systems model in looking at the different ways that support can be provided. We do provide support to every level of that, whether it's the district, the schools themselves, or helping Ron out and focusing and building his team. We feel it's really, really important to build the internal capacity, again, because many of our units inside don't really know about early warning systems. They've been focused, again, on compliance issues. And this is a resource that we believe is coming, as Ellen mentioned. Legislation is moving forward in California and nationally where early warning systems are going to probably be an integral part of the legislation. Our pilot is really beginning to move that forward. We are beginning to understand what it takes, and keep in mind that there are 12 educational program consultants who are part of this team and other ancillary staff that support this work. We have a wiki, we have other resources that we've built to support the project, but in total, that model I think has proven very exciting internally, and hopefully the sites are getting the support that they need. We'll be getting feedback on that because one of our partners is the National Center, the Comprehensive Center, AIR, is documenting our process. So when we write up or when they write up what's happened here in California, they're going to be tracking exactly what happened, what role did the EPCs, the educational programs consultants play, and how was that experienced in the field, because they're doing field interviews even as we speak with the schools that are involved in this project. So there's a whole parallel process of documentation of what's going on in California that's being undertaken by the California Comprehensive Center. Did that answer the question?
Yes, that was great. Thank you so much. There's just a few more questions, and maybe we can just hit on them all quickly, being cognizant of the time. The next one is to both California and Virginia, and it asked, what kinds of feedback have you gotten from schools, and how have you been able to respond to that feedback? And if each of you guys want to just maybe pick kind of one key element and be able to describe it quickly, that'd be wonderful. Lynn, do you want to give it a first?
I would. And I think what I would say that we've gotten the most positive feedback about is that we've tried to create sort of a package of technical assistance, and that includes essentially the early warning system, essentially the system developed by the National High School Center, a comprehensive needs assessment on the 8 elements of school improvement, and those 8 elements are on the High School Center's website, and then a series of webinars based on those 8 elements of high school improvement to really flesh those out and encourage reflection among the school teams throughout the year. And then in the school improvement plans that our schools will complete, they can select indicators or any of the strands of those 8 elements to focus on for school improvement. People seem to really be liking that we've sort of picked an area that's rich in research, and we're fleshing it out over the course of an entire school year. We're trying to help people make connections between the research, the early warning system, what they're doing in their schools, and their comprehensive plan. So I would say that would be a plus that I have received quite a bit of good feedback on.
Well, in California, we've received a number of, in various areas regarding feedback, and last week we provided a presentation. Ron was there, as well as Johan and myself, and some of the feedback we received was right there and then. It was wonderful. We had a panel of participating schools that shared their experience, and the feedback they provided was very, very positive, that getting the conversation started. They have the same kind of vocabulary. They're focused on their interventions. They're excited to be able to share various effective interventions with each other, and not just the interventions, but how you implement those particular interventions. That's some of the feedback we received there. They're excited to be coaches for Cohort 2. So they're looking at this. One of our major goals was to view this as capacity building in areas of leadership. We really do view this as a collaborative project with all participating partners in this. We view our districts and schools as partners, and they feel that, and that's the kind of relationship building that we wanted to have, and we feel like we're being successful in that area. So those are some of the things. Because it's a voluntary basis, we've also recognized that some of the feedback that we've received is it's been a little bit less stressful for them because it has been voluntary. They recognize the importance of this type of a project, and so they're all staying on with it. The additional feedback we received is really linking research-based interventions, as Lynn was talking about, focusing on the research and connecting it to the interventions. We find that's critical, and that's what they want as well. So they're very, very interested in participating in the webinars. Every one of them does participate when we move forward on that. We recognize their time is really essential. The folks that we're interacting with, just like Virginia is, these are the school site administrators, county office, district administrators, that they're all wanting to participate. But I think probably the best thing we've learned is that they like the model of collaboration that we've created, and very appreciative of that.
And in addition to what Ellen mentioned, I would also add that the community of learners process, in which a great deal of information and resources have been provided by the California Department of Education. But in addition to that, they've had a marvelous learning experience where they're learning from each other. And that's been very, very instrumental to them progressing at the level in which they have.
And I'd just like to add on to that too, Ron. I think that because of that, they've been able to embrace the work that they're doing. It elevates them into their leadership role, so they really get to take that leadership role on and move it across the state. They recognize that they're part of something bigger than themselves, and I think that that's pretty darn exciting.
Great. I appreciate you guys sharing all of that candid feedback and how you guys have been able to actually get the positive feedback and learn from those experiences as well. We have one other question, and this question is for Virginia and asking about who Virginia has used to develop their early warning system. I know that you use the National High School Center's version that's available on our website, betterhighschools.org, but you mentioned that you also used another vendor.
Okay, sure. My director issued an RFP early this past summer to get a company to develop a product for Virginia, with the goal being that schools could buy this product at a low price, and it would be able to do everything that the early warning system does. Plus, it could provide snapshots of data at any time throughout the year. So perhaps a school would say, I want to check my data, on a monthly basis. I want to check it on a 6-week basis. Have some bells and whistles associated with it, and also increase the ease with which data can be uploaded to the system. We, too, had some challenges because we have a number of different student data management systems that our schools use throughout the Commonwealth. So they were looking for something that would either sit on top of a system that we have in the Commonwealth called SIF, School Interoperability Framework System, or that the company would really work with the schools to kind of customize their data uploads. And CaseNext, which was the company that won the RFP, and they've worked a lot with New York and also some with New Mexico. And their product, it's a little confusing. It sounds like they have a bunch of different company names, but their website is actually datacation.com. And they have assisted us, and I think we've got about 250 schools on board that have purchased their product thus far. And since there are so many options for setting thresholds, you can set school thresholds, division thresholds, and then we can set state thresholds that go with research-based evidence. There's just a lot of options for schools, and schools have selected to use it elementary, middle, and high school.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. That wraps up all of the questions that we've received from participants. I would like to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar, and want to remind you that this webinar will be archived on our website by the end of the week. Thank you, and have a great day.